Alright, good morning. Just getting kicking off for today. All the usual, just a few minutes just while everyone joins. We'll do all our introductions and get going about what we're going to be talking about and looking at on our live stream today. So as always, as you guys join, let us know who's watching, where you're watching from. And I've obviously got a guest today who's just crept out from behind the compost pad. There's assistant gardener Oli. We'll do all the full starts in a minute once we've got everybody joined and settled in here. See everyone's starting. Just in advance, as always, do let us know if you've got any questions as we go on through. And I'm just going to make sure I got the question screen up here. Should come down in a moment. Hopefully we'll get the questions coming up in a sec. Anyway, so I see most people are joining and we'll flip that one round. Hello, good morning everybody. So, oh, that's a bit, there we go, that's a bit better. There we go. Cool, so we're here on, section of the North Ride, the Domain Walks, here in our composting pad area. So those of you who are regular walkers, visitors here in the estate, have probably seen one of our trails, Edge Trails, comes past our main composting pad, which we've really kicked back into action this year actually, which is great. And that was off the back of moving all of our grass cuts around the estate to a single cut and lift. So we've had obviously quite a lot of material, and then that gets tempered down with other stuff, and I've been yabbing on about that for a while in the various streams. Yeah. So we'll have a look at that in a minute, just as everyone else is joining. So like I say, let us know where you're watching from, and all the regulars and everything like that, and we'll kick off now.
Why not?
Let's go now. Yeah. So for those of you who are new to our Mount Stewart Moment live streams, I'm Toby, I'm the area ranger here, and every month now I do these live streams for about an hour or so, usually at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, once a month. And this was born out of the lockdown, where we were bringing Mount Stewart to you guys when you couldn't visit, and it was enjoyed by everyone so much, and sort of has opened up new sort of views and doors to visitors when they've seen all the things that perhaps they just didn't know before. It's been really good, and having guests along the way. So we've got assistant head gardener Oliver Johnson.
Yeah, Oli will do. Yeah.
Joining us today, just out of his busy day as always. We're going to take a stroll from here at the composting pad, past Ploughman's Hill Meadow, and on through a quick visit up onto McComb's Hill. And then dropping down into the Lilly Wood and sort of finishing around the sunk garden area, which the signal gets a bit iffy there, and we'll see how far we can get on that side. So hopefully you guys will enjoy the stroll today. So I'm going to flip the camera around here, and Ollie's going to be the main talker here, because we'll kick off with we're started here in the functional areas of the domain. And that's mainly because this whole section that we're going to walk through plays quite an important part in how the gardens collection is protected from the various weather that we get through here. And of course the compost pad itself gets called it's the beating heart of the gardens. So tell us a bit about it.
So at the beginning of last year we decided we were going to be a bit more serious about how we were composting things, and like Toby said, the single cut on the sort of meadow areas, meadow is a bit of a posh word for what some of those areas are, has given us plenty of material coming off it. And Toby's been doing some work down the drive, cutting down some of the gristolina, which I'm sure he'll talk to you about later. But that provides us with plenty of fresh green chips go into it. It's important with compost that you don't just create a grass pile, because it will just silage and turn into this horrible stinking muck. So you want to get plenty of brown in there, which is carbon rather than nitrogen like grasses and leaves. And so the chips providing a lot of that. You can see we're getting the leaves down now as well. Stewart's come back from furlough in the recent past, and clearing the leaves from the areas of lawn is part of his job, and we've got tons and tons of that coming down. Now a lot of this is, you'll know from walking around, oak and beech leaves, which can take 2 years to break down on their own, but once they go into the middle of that pile, the temperature in there is going to be so high that they'll break down, I'm hoping within about 6 or 7 months or so. Give it plenty of oxygen, plenty of stirring, and then we should have really good stuff to take out and put back into the garden again. There is a small pile just there, which is some stuff that we had, let's go and have a look, mate, that we had on the cook. That
was last year.
Was it last year? Yeah, okay.
In fact, I'm pretty sure this is mostly chipped gristolina that went into this, but we didn't really have a huge amount, but it's turned out pretty good.
It's bloody brilliant. It's very heavy. So we've used a bit of it up in the nursery recently, and we found that we've had to add quite a lot into it because you can see it clags up. But it's so rich and dark, and there's a little, there's a little millipede or something in there. But we found loads of worms in there as well. It's all really good stuff, particularly for mulching certain areas of the garden. And you know, if we got that from last year, and then we've got all of this to come from this year, we're never going to run out of compost. And it's just it's a great thing to do. We've got so much green material, herbaceous material that comes out of the garden. It's stupid not to use it to put back into the garden again. It's just like Toby says, it's the artery network to go back in. You take the life away from the garden, you put it back on the soil again. Hopefully it'll just spur everything into a greater form of life.
Definitely. We were talking about heat there and how hot the actual centre of the compost gets. Now when we did, I think it was the first stir of this was late August, I think it was, and it was actually too hot to touch when I'd stirred it. It was like, yeah, crazy, and you know, even in August, and it was, I mean, it wasn't the hottest of August, but it was steaming away. And when this gets stirred again next time, it's still really hot inside there. We should have got a temperature thermometer or something.
Do you want me to go digging into it?
Yeah, see if we get a bit of steam. Get a bit of steam. It does stink as well.
The heat is vital in a compost heap because it means that if you do have any pathogens or any weed seedlings in there, the heat of it will kill them off so that it's fine to go back out into the garden again. You see the straw down here again, that's a good use of carbon going into it, and it just helps the structure of the compost. It is going to be very claggy like that stuff over there, but anything you can do to help break it up, provide some layers and some fibre into it, is going to be all for the better. So I assume I'm going to be the one climbing onto it and heaping through it.
Well, we'll see if we can poke something in the side there and have a good go. I'll just chat through. So as Oli was saying, we've added, it's not just the grass itself because it does get quite sort of lacquery. So what we've done, we've been through the last few months, we've been mixing in the chipped grissolinia into it as well, which just helps temper it down. There we go. Look, you can probably pick this up, just about sort of see the steam coming off it, even just a little bit few.
You can also see on the bits of wood chip here, we've got all of this white growing on it, and it's not ash, that's mycelium. It's it'll be a type of fungus which is just helping to break it down. It's a saprophytic fungus, which means it feeds off the dead things like wood chip, and it's vital to the breaking down process. Basically what you're trying to do with compost is turn it into a thing called humus, which is like the last thing that's left behind once it's been broken down. And humus is brilliant for soil in all sorts of scientific ways that we don't have to go into, but that's essentially what you're looking to create. And so I've gone down that far, I put my hand on that, and I can feel it's much hotter than body temperature, and that's just a foot and a half into it. In the middle of that, it's going to be.
It looks wet on the outside, but actually, relatively speaking, it's actually quite dry in the middle because of that heat. It's just slowly sort of out, and the heat sort of transpires up through. Okay, well that's nice to sort of kick off with that. Yeah, and your hands are already dirty anyway. I've got to keep my hands clean for the kit for once.
Yeah. If you're not getting dirty doing your job at this time of year, you're not doing it right, Toby.
Indeed. So we'll take move on up through to the Ploughman's Meadow, and I'll just see who's joined us. I'll give all the shouts. A couple of walkers, morning. So let's have a look who's been joining us. Hazel, good morning. Heather, good morning. Liz, good morning. We've got Joe, hiya Charmaine, hiya Julia, hi Lynn, and hiya Jane. So we've got people watching, quite a lot of the regulars there, which is great. Funnily enough, I actually bumped into Jackie, one of our regular watchers, who's actually visiting here today, and she had a burning question, which is probably a good chance to ask. She was worried about her rowan and sorbus memorial trees, and obviously we've been talking about ash dieback lately, and of course, thankfully, ash dieback only affects the common ash, so it affects us. So none of the sorbuses, none of the rowans, mountain ash, they don't get affected by ash dieback, thankfully, which is really good. So she was pleased to hear that, which is nice, but I thought probably worth mentioning, just in case anyone else was worried. We do have ash dieback here, as people have seen. It's occurring in a couple of places, and it's like I said in the video last time, it's just starting, but we haven't even seen the worst of it yet. And
it's going to rip through. Yeah.
So ash, funnily enough, it's one of the ones that regenerate quite a lot through our woodlands here, and it's a really important tree that's going to be missing from the landscape. And some of the shelter belts, which is part of what we're going to be talking about today, are actually made up from a good 50-60% ash. So we're going to need to be making sure that part of our woodland management looks at kind of restocking and replacing those, knowing that chances are a lot of them are going to go.
There is, I don't know if you've read it, there's positives coming from a grower in England where they've got something like 5,000 individual plants of ash that are immune to the disease that they're going to then breed again to get another generation out of them, and then we can start plopping these back out into the countryside with what is hopefully a resistant strain of ash trees to repopulate the countryside in a manner that hasn't happened with elms, but we were a bit quicker on the draw this time.
Yeah, that's it. And viewers, some of the regulars will probably know that I've talked about elm here on the estate as well. That we do have a couple of pretty good size elm trees that have escaped the initial sort of felling that took place in the 70s and 80s as Dutch elm disease sort of took hold. And we're seeing a lot of regeneration through the woodland as well, with no sign of the Dutch elm disease beetle in any of them yet. So we might see elm kind of partially back on the estate as well at one point or another, but it does come in waves. Anyone who's watching from mainland England will know that you sort of see it come up maybe about 20-25 years old, and then it just gets hit and sort of see the big sort of dead elms through the hedgerow. Yeah, it's...
Because elms are beautiful. They're great trees.
They really are, and part of our woodland management here needs to consider all of these things actually that's going on. There's so many things at play.
I mean, you want to talk about woodland management though, look at the yellow and the gold coming off the birch trees there, the young saplings of the birch, then building into the Scots pines up there in the corner. It just, yeah, it's a lovely view at this point, isn't it? Even though the storm blasted all the leaves off the beach earlier in the week, last week. Yeah.
But it is mid-November, it's
good, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a very sort of extended autumn, to say the least. So like part of our work actually from the woodland management point of view needed the leaves to drop and those trees to go dormant before we started work on them. So it's been a sort of a slow start.
As I would prefer autumn to be long and winter to be brief. Yeah.
That's it. So actually, Oli, as ever, is hitting these amazing segues into kind of our topics today. So just take a hold there. So Oli just picked out, you can see the golden ash, sorry, not ash, birch, sorry, that sits through this new plantation that's been extended into Ploughman's Hill here. Now this was part of the extension of the McCombs Hill woodland, which sits just behind there. You can see the mature canopy. Now this was done mainly because we've got a very sort of lacking understory within McCombs Hill, and that's because of the rhododendron and the laurel growth has prevented natural regeneration of that area of the woodland. And so as a result, wind tunnels are starting to open up in some of these areas. And that means you're getting sort of cold air flowing through, various other sort of damaging winds that hit the gardens area. I'm gonna turn you around that way, Oli. Okay. So you can see your lovely face while I'm talking to you. So yeah, if you want to come out, so just some of those things that you've seen in your time here, and then also I suppose the impact that these shelter belts have for the gardens collection.
The shelter belt and the protection from the lock, the microclimate is why this garden exists and why it is so special that we can grow these plants in the garden on a line of latitude that no other gardens can. And the shelter from the wind is vital to that. And it has, particularly Stormophilia on the other side of the estate, did a vast amount of damage to our shelter belt out there. And it has to be a process of replenishment, and a lot of the times the trees won't necessarily do it themselves. Toby mentioned the rhododendron and the laurel, which certainly has a detrimental effect on the regeneration, but it's also the canopy of the beech trees. They create a really dense shade, which oak saplings in particular don't like. Also, grey squirrels would have had an effect throughout the year. We find hazels, there are some hazels planted in there that we can see, but actually hazel's self-seeding tends to not happen in areas with greys, because you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but the greys pick the nuts before they're ready and will bury them, and so you just don't get another generation of hazels coming through without sort of a human input into it.
Yeah, that's right. So again, yeah, the grey squirrel has such a big impact on natural regeneration of woodland, and that's primarily because the amount that they eat, as well as taking seed stock before it's even ripe. And probably a few regulars will remember me talking about how we obviously do a certain amount of supplementary feeding for our red squirrels here, and we actually supplementary feed with about 10% of their feed mix is viable cobnut hazelnut seeds, which a lot of them will cache and bury around the estate, and we have got so much hazel coming up in the woodlands now as a result, which is brilliant. Hazel's one of those species that's been really missing from the understory of a lot of the woodlands here, so it's great to see it. One being sort of planted in, and there's actually some of it there, as well as what the red squirrels are helping their regeneration with as well.
And like the elms, there is such a cultural connection to hazels that kind of gets lost. Like historically, it's one of the most important woodland plants. The coppicing of it, the use of it for building fences, building all sorts of things that our very ancient predecessors would have used it for, and we sort of become removed from it and forget about it. So you know, it's nice to put a little bit back in and draw attention to it, and yeah.
Definitely, if you've got space in your garden, get some hazel in it. It's beautiful, beautiful. Oli, you probably didn't pick that up on the microphone, but Oli says plant rhododendron. So just before we sort of go up onto McCombs Hill, probably a chance just to talk about our grazing regime update here. So Plowman's Hill Meadow, which most of you will know we reseeded from scratch with a species-rich meadow mix, basically because the seed stock here was gone after sort of 30 or so years of quite heavy arable year-on-year ploughing production, and it had its summer cuts this year, which you can see took place, but we left this year a much wider margin. You can see up through here. We left that uncut, and we've been doing basically some paddock grazing up through it this winter. So you can see Alan Angus, one of our tenants, his shorthorn beef stock herd there. They're in the upper paddock section at the moment, so they've already eaten down this bit, quite nice. Just slightly poaching the ground a little bit, which basically provides new soil areas for the seed stock to regenerate in, so especially annuals. And Oli, it's probably a chance for you to talk about this, because you don't get a chance to talk about sort of seed stock regeneration that much if you want to. So this whole concept, some annuals need, it's like the proverbial cowslip to
you need broken ground for it to go into, particularly if you've got oxeye daisy in your meadow mix. It will spread furiously on its own, and breaking the ground up helps to disrupt the behaviours of some plants and allows others to germinate that you wouldn't see. I mean, the annual cornflower meadow is a classic case. It's the mix that you will buy in any garden centre or supermarket or B&Q, but unless you're going to treat the ground like an annual corn meadow, you're not going to get the cornflower mix coming through year on year. You need to break the ground, you need to let the stocks replenish themselves.
Yeah, so a lot of people are asking, why wasn't it full of the corn marigold, the poppy, and all of those very kind of bright coloured flowers in its second year? And that's because the perennials had started to establish themselves. So that's your knapweeds, the oxeye, yarrow, and funnily enough, that second year was very heavy with the wild carrot, which was nice. But then again, the third year this year, it all kind of just balanced itself out a little bit, and you're going to see different things every year.
It's the beautiful thing about all kinds of meadows, be it annual or perennial, is that over time, I mean, no meadow is sowed in a year. You're talking a decade, 3 decades, half a century, but you can watch the story of the meadow move across it as different species colonise different areas, and it's sort of this moving collage of plants, which is a bit of an abstract way to talk about it, but it is, you can watch it year on year. It's a long process.
And it's probably one to watch actually this year, 2021, as this meadow comes back in. So the grazing stock will be off here probably around February, maybe March, depending on how wet the ground gets. So finishing this paddock grazing, they will probably have a light spring grazing actually on the rest of the meadow itself. But I bet, like, you guys, when you're visiting, have a look up this line and just see the difference in the plant stock that comes up with the different grazing. So we've had quite heavy paddock grazing here on this section that didn't get an annual cut. And then that section there has obviously had an annual cut, will have less grazing this winter. And it's all about that, just mixing up the way it's managed will mix up what you get.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So let's move on. I'm gonna. Well, Oli can say where we're heading in a minute. Well, I'll look through some of your questions. As always, do get your questions in if you've got anything you want to ask. So I've got the mic pointing in Oli's direction. So hopefully the sound has been okay today, and we're just going to head up into the lower sort of terrace path onto McCombs Hill here, and then we'll drop down into the Lilly Wood,
up and amongst the beech trees.
Yeah.
But this section here, talking about the replenishment of the shelter belt, you can see the layers in the planting with the young saplings here and then the slightly older generation. Then as we get in amongst the beech, have a look at how bare the trunks are and how far apart they are, because if this cover isn't here, the wind just whistles through. And we have seen beams dropped off trees this year, we've seen younger plants blown over, we've lost bits and pieces. There's always collateral in a garden. It's never going to be perfect, but the more you can protect yourself, particularly from the salt that blows up off of the lock, the better you can do from it. and some of the trees, which hopefully we'll walk past later on, things like the Pinus radiata and Cupressus macrocarpa, the Monterey pine and the Monterey cypress, are particularly good at taking the salt. And this is a young Pinus radiata, or the radiator pine, hidden away nicely in here, so it's actually getting quite a lot of shelter, but it will grow up. It gets a wonderful head on it, and yeah, just soaks up salt, takes all the wind you want to throw at it. There are some brilliant examples, so I'll stand on your other side, mate. Some brilliant examples down the driveway, which we might walk past. There's also just some holly with berries on there. I didn't know we had any berries in on this part of the garden, but I mean, like I was saying, just look at the trunks of the beech trees here. One of the things I was reading a book by Oliver Rackham called The History of the English Countryside, which does branch, it might be the British countryside. But one of the things he was saying that I never really thought about before is back before the Industrial Revolution, you know, our great whatever grandparents, they would never have seen the trunks of trees, because one of the things that's come with the Industrial Revolution is the pollution in the air, and the pollution in the air has done away with huge amounts of lichen and mosses that would have covered every tree, and you just wouldn't have been able to get near them. You know, we've got a certain side of the tree where the water runs down, where it's in the shade, you will get the moss growing there, but it would have been like that on every tree in the woodlands. It's something that it just never occurred to me before.
Yeah, funny, especially if anyone who walks up in the morns, just as you head up through the lowland woodlands, as you sort of get out onto the moors themselves, there's quite nice lichens all over the woodlands through there, and of course any of the rocks in that area are absolutely covered. And I mean, depending on which side of the tree you look, you'll get different species as well. So I was just picking out a couple of the...
I went for a walk at the weekend, and I spent far longer than any man should looking at moss. I sort of stood there gazing through it in the sunlight as people walk past me, looking at me like I'm mad. But it's one of those things that, again, you just walk past it, you never actually look at it, but once you start paying a bit more detail to it, you can see the intricacies of this form of life. So mosses, I believe lichens as well, club mosses and algae are bryophytes. So they're one of the earlier form of plant life. They don't flower, they don't have something called a cuticle, which most of the more modern I mean, you know, millions of years ago, but they have these cuticles on the leaves which prevents moisture transpiring from the leaves. It prevents them from drying out, which moss doesn't have, which is why moss always grows in dark, dank, wet places. It also needs standing water for its reproductive cycle as well, which is again why you only get it in wet places. It's one of the many evolutionary traits that plants have picked up over the years to allow them to grow in more disparate surroundings is cuticles on the leaves, very waxy ones. So actually Grissellina is a good one to look at, as is the holly that we've got just here. Grissellina, you're not going to be able to see it, but you can feel it under your fingers. It's plasticky, and that's the cuticle on it. And then ivy, I hope you all know what an ivy leaf feels like. It feels solid, it feels...
Holly,
sorry, yeah. Ilex was what I was going for, and then I changed my mind. But it's got that sort of waxiness to it, and that's what prevents it from drying out. Yeah, there you go, cuticles.
Word of the day.
Yeah, better than incremental. This is Ruscus, I believe this is. The only reason this is interesting is because these leaves aren't leaves, these are clados, so you can see these little bobbles on them. This is a berry that's coming, so that behind it, that was the flower, and if it's flowering from there, it means it can't be a leaf, and you can sort of see that it just comes straight out of the stem, and that means that botanically it's called a cladode, and it's butcher's broom this, and it's spiky as anything, but each one of these is going to turn into a little red berry, and it's just, again, one of those little things that you walk past, you don't look at it, you don't pay any attention to it, but it's actually a very, well, it's a somewhat interesting area of botany.
I think this is all these things, and the feedback I've been getting since obviously doing these live streams is just how it's opened people's eyes. Like, they've been coming here for decades, and it's like visiting for the first time again. So it's really rewarding to hear that this you know, these little snippets have been really useful for people, and be it because they can't get here, or just because it's just something new, something different. Just looks fresh eyes on a fresh area. So we're just passing up through the low terrace of McCombs Hill. Most of the McCombs is on the left. It goes up quite a fair way. It's one of the higher hills on the estate, and we're actually on top of what would have been the cliff that dropped down onto the raised beach area. So when the sea levels were higher, here. The drive itself, which you can just sort of see here, that would have been kind of like the mean tide, high tide mark, and you would have had the sea sort of lapping at the cliff here. And you see this raised beach actually all the way along the western shoreline of the loch itself. And the way things are going, it'll probably come back again at some point soon.
We've got the Gristolinia growing in front of us just here, and the seedlings growing around. And Gristolinia's species name is Littoralis, Littoralis. And the littoral space is that comes between the beach and the cliff space. So it's not the beach and it's not the land, it's that little area in between. It's why Gristolinia is another really good cover plant for salt spray, bad soil, high winds, you know, all the horrible things that come with living by the sea edge. But yeah, it's one of those species names that once you start picking up what I think of as the horticulturalist Latin, you start to see where it wants to grow, or at least where it came from, so you get some idea of where it will grow.
No, definitely. I've just been talking, obviously we have been clearing Gristolinia from within the woodlands where it does get a bit too rambunctious and does basically blanket out. Rambunctious, that's a good one. That's a good one. And we'll blanket out sort of the more favoured species that we want, but it definitely serves its purpose here. And this is what this kind of main theme today has been about, is looking at actually how our woodlands, how our planting serves a functional rather than a form-based solution for the
Gristolinia. It just provides a wall. It's a screen as much to the eye as anything, but if you can't see through it, the wind isn't going to get through it. And it's a great plant. I love Gristolinia. I think it's beautiful. It's a great hedging plant as well. It shapes up very nicely if you want to take the hedge cutters to it. Just growing there, you've got this beautiful birch, which must be 40, 50 if it's anything, if not more than that, 60, 70, but they're gorgeous, gorgeous plants once they get going. That's Betula pendula, or one of my friends calls them Betula pendula, which is putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. But it's beautiful buds. So this is the white birch that you will see commonly everywhere, but look at how it gets all kind of gnarled and it weeps a little bit. It reminds me of sort of a swamp plant. I think they're gorgeous things.
Well, of course, it's a colonising species, so it would be one of those ones that you would quite often see on the edges of bogs, and it works its way through. And you're right, there are some absolutely cracking birch trees, especially actually on this section. There's a brilliant one. Yeah, there's an absolutely brilliant one just on along the drive a bit, and I've got my eye on it. When the time comes and it does fail or for whatever reason, it's going to make some really nice milled planks out of it. I think it'll be yeah, definitely. And
my dead body, is it coming down any time sooner than when it?
And I definitely wouldn't want to take it down before its time, but
it disappears one day.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's unusual to see birch get as big as some of the ones that are here. Just mainly because they get sort of smothered out by the other more dominant species.
And also they tend to get planted in gardens. They're one of those trees that they get sold as being sort of for small gardens, and it's because they're slow growing, and they do. You know, they grow slowly, they stay small for a long time, but all slow growing plants do eventually get big, and so they will eventually grow out their space. And it's when you get into a garden of this scale that you can allow things take their sort of maximum form and allow them to spread out a little bit further. We've also got one of the Pinus radiata popping up just there. You can see the height that it gets to, and that's in the full force, the full brunt of the wind there. And it just, you know, it's fine, it's green, it's lush, it's happy as anything, is it? Yeah. Fantastic plant. The rhododendrons that are growing along this bank here as well. Back in Lady Edith's time, they would have brought cartloads of manure up this path here and dumped it down the bank and let it roll down and over the root plates of the rhododendrons to give them a bit of a feed, which is something that we don't really have time to do anymore. But they get plenty of leaf litter growing down onto them. The other issue, particularly with that bank, as Toby said, it's the old cliff edge, it's very steep. The water just sluices down off the cliffs. Once we get into the bottom of the Lilly Wood, we can look at the areas down there as well, because the water just runs away with a vengeance here.
Definitely, and of course, you know, we're getting more and more extreme, intense weather events, and the last 2 days is a perfect example of that. Just more than half a month's rain in the space of a couple of hours. And yeah, so we've got quite a few new springs popping up around the estate. And,
in the middle of the path as well, which is ideal. Yeah, just little bubbling brooks coming out of the middle of the path network.
And of course, you know, it's where the water works its way through the clay bands here on the estate, and it'll hit a harder bit and it just comes to the surface. And funnily enough, I was actually just sort of looking at some of the Prony old maps of the Ars Peninsula area, and of course most of the peninsula is that glacial drumlin landscape. And if you look at any of the old maps where they used to label where the springs and the rises were, you just see rises written all over the maps everywhere. And random fact, just because I was looking it up, Ballywater Estate, Ballywater Park, that used to be called Springvale Domain.
Great
Interesting one, yeah, just because we were talking about it with the current owners that are nice over there. So yeah, Ollie, you wanted to pop up here for another reason, and that's mainly because this the upper section of the terrace path had a bit of restocking done recently.
Well, yeah, not restocking, more a change of planting. So one of the gardens in Western Scotland that sits very much like this area does, sort of jutting out onto there, straight out into the sea rather than onto a loch. They planted a wealth, yeah, that's a dead one, don't look at that one. They planted a wealth of monkey puzzle trees, which are Oricaria oricana, and the year before last, yeah, there's a couple around, there's basically where the bamboo canes are, there's one up behind you here. We had a couple of French students over, and probably about this time of year, they planted up a bulk of seed-grown Oricaria oricana, which is the monkey puzzle tree. You see how spiky it is. Don't have to plant it with any kind of rabbit guard around them, because you've got to be a brave rabbit to want to eat one of these things. But the idea is these things are incredibly slow growing, but at some point this is going to be a really interesting grove of trees. And in their native Chile, they're dying out. They forest fires are taking them out, and they're being felled for the timber as well. And they actually think it's like the Lebanon cedars, Cedrus libani, that we have a greater variation in the genetic stock in the UK than is currently existing in their native habitat. Yeah, it's all something, isn't it?
I think it's one of the beauties, again, you just touched on it earlier on, Ollie, is that we've got the space here on the domain to be able to kind of have these little curiosities and do them to a certain scale that gives them, does them justice, really.
Yeah, and once these things, they're beautiful, stately things when they're young, and then they go through that kind of teenage period of being horribly ugly trees, and then after about 200 years you'll get something big enough to be worth looking at. They say you don't plant a tree for yourself, you plant it for your children, but really you're planting monkey puzzles for the generations that come after us. It's not going to be anyone.
There's only really a handful of good mature monkey puzzles, certainly here at Mount Stewart, and I know Rowellin's got an absolute stonking one.
Yeah, we've got one at the back of the Mary Garden. They're spotted, they're dotted around. They first came across in the early 1800s. They were sent back mainly by a man called William Lobb, who I did a little video about a while ago. I've got a lot of time for William Lobb. But they became the plant to put in. And so I always think if you see a monkey puzzle just sort of growing on its own in a landscape somewhere, there would have been a great house there, or there would have been a botanist who put it into place. Sorry, mate, I ran over you there. Go on.
No, not at all. I mean, this is the beauty of the live streams. They're sort of they're very, very flippant. I'll say that. It's great. It's great. It wouldn't be one of my live streams or one of my videos without me talking about deadwood, and we just happen to be stood next to an absolutely cracking standing dead oak here, with all those lovely knobbly burrs all the way up it, and beautiful bit of habitat there that's probably been there already for about 10 years, I would imagine, looking at the way the bark has already peeled off, and that'll probably be there for another 20 or 30 more before it even thinks about toppling over. And of course, you can see all the little spiders' webs in through there. You've got all the insects will be in the middle. Look at that burr. That's a lovely burr.
We were talking about the replenishment of the seed stock, and you look at what's growing on the ground around us here, which is actually, I mean, for this area is quite an open section, although you look at the canopy of the beech trees, you see how much they cover. All that we've got on the ground is holly that's coming through, grissolinia that's coming through. There's lots of thuya, the conifer that's coming up as well, but there is no oak or hazel growing up, and it needs the human input to help bulk it up.
Yeah, so a bit further actually, just into the distance, so you can see a bit of grissolinia there in the front, and a bit further on back is that used to be all laurel and grissolinia as well, so that was cleared over the last 3 or 4 years. I think we finished up the bulk of it last winter, and we've still got a few more patches just on that side. But again, so once that's cleared and has been stump treated and we do the follow-ups, that's when you can see, well, one, what does come up natural regen wise, which it's been okay in places. Here, like Ollie says, has been a bit of a mixed bag in what's actually coming up. So coming in just to sort of do a little bit of restocking. And here's a good comparison. So yeah, this side here, obviously it does still have that mature beech canopy, which does shelter out a fair bit. And then turn around here where you can see the original beech tree stump just here. Look at all those seedlings coming up. Mostly beech, which is good, but you've got all sorts going on in there.
There's an oak there. There's an oak growing up in there. There's all sorts growing here. Some of it will have seeded itself. Some of it will have been planted. You can see there's plenty of rhododendrons in this area. But the driveway is for rhododendrons. It was part of the story of coming into Mount Stewart, coming into Lady Edith's Mount Stewart, is that you'd start at the entrance to the driveway there, and you'd come down this kind of historic path network on your coach, and you'd see these tree rhododendrons. Rhododendron, the name rhodo is rose and dendro is tree. The Greek island of Rhodes is named, they think, because of the variety of roses that were growing there when the Greeks first named it. But tree rhododendrons weren't as ubiquitous then as they are now, and certainly they're still not as ubiquitous over the rest of the UK as they are in this garden. But they are unbelievably fascinating plants. I'm going to go delving into I want to go and get one of the leaves off one of these ones.
So while Oli's having a bit of a rummage down there, just pick up a few questions as well, just to check everyone who's come. We've got a few more people who've said hello. So hi, Elizabeth. Jenny says, Oli, Jenny says you'll now be known as Sterling Moss.
Sterling Moss, okay.
He likes that. He's been known as worse things, he says. So Becky, hello, you got yourself booked in this Sunday and haven't been visiting here in months, so I hope you enjoy your visit, Becky. Good to hear from you. Yeah, so you just had a bit of a rummage there. That was one of the larger leaf?
Well, this is one of the smaller leaf ones, but I just wanted to show you it because it's got this lovely sort of halo of spidery hairs around the edge of it. And there's no what would be called an indementum, which is this kind of woolly undercovering, which could be for a variety of things. It could be to prevent insects from feeding on the leaves. It could be to provide a bit of cover and warmth for the leaf. It could be to stop it transpiring. Again, it's got this very plasticky feel to the leaf to prevent moisture loss. This is a type called Cyno-falconeri, which means it's going to almost certainly, hopefully, be a cross between Cyno grande, Cyno meaning China and that area, and grande meaning big, so it's the big Chinese rhododendron, tree rhododendron, and the falconeri have this more sort of ovate leaf on them, but they have a feel of it, mate. Go on,
it's super fairy. I'm just because in the background, actually, just here, this is more of it, and depending on what angle you walk by it, it gets all these different colours as you look under, from the under the leaves themselves.
That's before it even starts flowering. Some of the rhododendrons have wonderful bark on them. Again, it's just a case of looking a bit closer, isn't it? You look a little closer, you see a little more. That's one of the Cyno grandes growing there with the silver, and that actually that's one of the things.
Take a closer look before we head down the hill. Yeah.
We get plenty of self-seeded rhododendrons, self-hybridized rhododendrons popping up all over the place. That could be one of them. It hasn't got a tag on it. It tends to happen more over on Clark's Hill, but we've got a great climate for them. They love it here, and crucial plants.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a bit of a silhouette here. Probably have to look downhill at them.
Go on.
There you go.
So this, I'm pretty sure, is just going to be straight Cyno grande, and it's got a silvery underside rather than that bronziness coming from it. But it's got slightly more canoe-shaped leaf rather than the ovateness which was coming from the falconeri. It's got silver juvenile growth on it, and they're just gorgeous plants, aren't they? And then this growing next to it, this is the tree heather. This is Erica arborea, which is again another plant that was used. It was one of those sort of exotic plants.
There's a few bits in flower there as well, actually, which is quite nice.
Seed themselves furiously. They're originally from Spain and the Mediterranean plateau, and they've got into North Africa now. They're just seeding everywhere with a vengeance.
One to keep an eye on.
Yeah, well, but they're in the gardens. They're lovely plants. They don't tend to take the salt too brilliantly. I wouldn't advise planting one in your yard. It's like echiums. If you plant one, your neighbours have them. But again, we've got the space to sort of get away with it a little bit here.
Definitely. I know, it's a absolute cracking tree. I mean, this, as we pass up through Lilly Wood, there's some absolute stonking specimens all the way through, which is brilliant. Here's the other one here with the brown. You really see that difference.
Bronze, not brown.
Sorry, we're gonna be really sort of
pedantic.
Yeah, pedantic. Yeah, we've got our Theosaurus out today. I mean, McCombs Hill and Clark's Hill / Rhododendron Hill, depending what you want to call it, is covered with a huge network, a plethora. of paths and little places to explore. So do take a stroll off the lake walk and follow the little routes, even just like this one. I'm like, okay, some of them are going to be maybe a little overgrown. We don't get a chance to get to everything all the time. But
a little bit overgrown is part of what a garden is, isn't it? It's not perfect. It's a woodland garden, this one. It's meant to have a bit of looseness around the edges. It's the enthusiasm and the ebullience of the planting flows everywhere. Granted, the brambles and the nettles could take a bit of a hit, but you can do what you can do, right? Just sorry, just we're walking back. Just have a look at how perfect that's the underside of another rhododendron leaf. Look at how perfect that Indomentum is. It's just, it looks like it's been cast out of gold. It's just gorgeous, gorgeous.
It's a lovely colour, definitely.
Walking beneath the Eucryphias, which are another core part of the plant here. This is I think this is Eucryphia cordata, but they have lovely white, open, sort of shining white flowers on them, and then this will be intermedia. Oh, this holm oak, isn't it? Just growing out the top of it. Yeah, so this is Eucryphia.
So some of the berries, the flowers have gone over just there. Very nice. Sort of a wispy, spidery, sort of webby-like texture over the top of it.
It does have a bit of fur on it, doesn't it? So that's the adaxial side of the leaf, and again, it's probably functioning in the same manner that the Indomentum is, in that it will be providing some form of protection to the leaf, perhaps from the glare of the sun, or again, if you've got hairs on a leaf, it can trap humidity around the layer of the leaf, which again prevents transpiration. It's all different reasons for things.
Cool, so we'll just take a bit of a zigzag back along the drive, and we're going to head in on...
You can see the birch up there, mate. You just look up the road.
Yeah, so that birch we were talking about doesn't look like much on the camera, but it's this one here. Next time you're visiting, have a look at that. It's probably one of the biggest girth birches I've seen. Cracking height on it. Probably won't be able to just about see it. That's the top of it just there. Yeah, huge cracking specimen. There was a second one there, if I remember right, a few years back. It might. I think, I know one went a while back, but there was one by the lake that had to be taken down as well. I think it was. Yeah. So birch tapping, of course, you can get some really interesting birch saps from them. Make some interesting mead out of that.
Lovely coppery blue hydrangea, but hydrangeas being very changeable in their colour depending on the it's the aluminium in the soil which is either locked up or released, whether the soil is alkaline or acidic, because we've taken a load of cuttings from these, and they're coming through more that colour than they are the blue, and that's just the minute differences in the rhizosphere, which is the area sort of very precisely around the root hairs, which will affect the growth of the plant, which the plant, sort of the roots of it, interact with.
So we're walking along what would have been a beach. I forget how many years ago, quite a long time ago.
I love these. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, mate. These sweeping bends. So as you walk along here, you've got to bear in mind that you were supposed to enter from the gatehouse down there, and you come along this path, and you come past these cliffs with these rhododendrons growing on them. If you came at the right time of year, these would just be shocks of colour all the way along. This is Rhododendron arboreum, which is just a gorgeous scarlet colour. There's some Fulcanaris, there's the Madenii down here, and they all coming through in these different colours, and you just be hit by all of this colour and life and growth. But it's quite a tight path, and you've got these big trees growing up around you. It's all it's the theatre of arriving at Mount Stewart, and it's not until you got to go around that corner up there. It's not until you're basically on top of the house that you actually see it, and before you've even got there, you've just been brought through one of the most incredible horticultural landscapes. You already know you're in somewhere that is just, it's a place apart. It's that fairyland, isn't it?
I mean, this goes into some of obviously the landscaping context of the wider domain. You've heard me talk about the trails and how those rides, they basically kissed the edges of the woodland to open out onto vistas. Otherwise you were kind of passing through these sort of tunnels and closed in areas, just like here up ahead of us, and then it reveals yet another view, a glade or something like that.
It's part of the gardening theory, isn't it, is that you give a dense wall and then you give a release to the eye and then you bring it back in. You need that contrast. You need to have the yin and the yang, the dark and the light. If you don't have something to compare it to, how can you see how beautiful it is? And talking of how beautiful things are, the bark of this Pinus radiata is just phenomenal. Look at the size of that tree, and it's sustaining various ferns growing up it, and is that a Griselinia or is it a holly coming out?
It wouldn't be a mature tree without a Griselinia somewhere in one of the forks of the...
But look at that, isn't it just
Just stand up by it, Ollie, because I mean, again, if people haven't visited here, or even like perhaps ventured off into some of the sort of the lesser known parts of the gardens that are in the domain, there are some absolutely amazing specimens out here. It's well worth, like, get up there, touch that tree, you know, look at it, you know, the textures, and you can see all of. I'm going to close up on this actually, because the algae, mosses, and lichens that are on this are. I mean, I can see. Oh, let's see. We've got 1, 2. I think just in this swell patch we've probably got about 7 or 8 different species just on this little section, and you go around the other side of the tree and it'll be different species again.
You've got these perfect little plant pockets for the ferns to be growing in as well. You can see the roots of them peeling down through the cracks here. It's just, yeah, it's get up closer. I walk or drive past this one probably a couple of times a day, and every time I do I'm always impressed by the beams and the height that are coming off it, and you look at it and you think, oh yeah, it's lovely, but you get up next to it and it dwarfs you. You cannot help but feel insignificant when you stand next to a tree like this.
That's it. I mean, it's not even just the tree. Look at its root structure system here. So it's hard to pick this out. But if I pass up from the ground here, look, and then that bank is one of its radial roots here. And on one side of it, obviously, it gets a little bit more light and has got more of the grasses on it. And on this side here, it's a bit darker. And you've got these little mini mossy caves in there, with some of the fern crowns there, all sorts of different species of moss, and little hidey holes in there as well. So something might be lurking in there. These little banks of moss. Again, if you look closer, they're like micro forests in their own right. Beautiful, beautiful. There's some of the other mosses there that produce like kind of almost like a fern-like leaf.
Yep. There's a little seedling of Pinus radiata that's coming up, dropped into its own root pad, and it's provided us with the next generation. So we will keep a close eye on that. Although if it goes, it'll bring it up with it, but I don't think it's going anytime soon.
Well, that's one of the other things. If say the root plate did ever fail of this tree, yeah, you know, those root plates, that's a big root plate. I mean, this particular tree, it's more likely to sort of tear down the middle probably, but long may it live. Onwards, yeah. We're getting all pervy on our trees now, which is great.
Get really in depth on them.
So let's time's moving on.
Just before
one more
tree here that we need to look at. This is so I'm running away from you. I'm pretty sure this is a Weinmannia trichosperma. Thankfully it's got a label on it so I can make sure I'm right. It might actually be oh no, it's a Nothofagus. Alright, so I'm not that interested in it then, but yeah, lovely. Go on, carry on.
There we go. So, who has seen some pretty amazing fungi this year? It's been an incredibly extended sort of blooming season when it comes to fungi. Well, just as we've been walking through, I was hoping to see a few of the collared earth star bands, but I think they've all gone over already. I mean, it's sort of had like a double bloom in a lot of fungi this year, but it's been absolutely stunning. Let us know what you've seen in your garden, and it was good to know. We'll pick up a few questions to pass through. Just out of curiosity, there's the Nordman fir that we did an extraction video on. That's ready for collection, and we'll be going over to Cardi Timber soon for milling. So that was a big old root plate came up with that. It might even be worth us finishing actually at the old root plate. So yeah, I'm just thinking because it's bound to be that the sunken garden sort of has a bit of a questionable signal there, so we can sort of skirt around the edge of that maybe, and then
just drop straight down.
Yeah.
It's the one again. It's an access path rather than an area that's actually open to the public. But just along the back there's a little route in where we can get our tractors into, or our machinery that we need to, into the Lilly Wood, and it's one of those sort of, much like the compost heap, it's one of the sort of, not forgotten necessarily, but it's just left to do whatever it wants to do, and there's luma seedlings and holly seedlings and yew growing through it, and it's just created its own sort of self-sustaining shelter belt, obviously bulked by the sea plantation, which is just over on the other side of it. But I really like walking down it because it's just sort of like dark and close. And
yeah, and again, loads of mosses and ferns and like creeping all over there. There's a little sort of gully that skirts the pathway along there as well, and it's got, you know, a nice little sort of standing water. It does run sometimes, but speaking of water,
yeah, we were talking about the amount of water that will come down off McCombs Hill there, and this is what it does. It sluices down and it just floods this lower part of the garden. We're in the memorial glade here, and I no one's driven up or down here recently, but you can see the damage that has been done by the excessive amount of water. I mean, you used exactly the right word for it earlier. It's an event. It's a rainfall event. It's not the clement weather that this garden was designed and created in. We're having to deal with vastly different forms of weather now. I'm going up to my ankles in it. No, you're right. You're looking the wrong way, mate. You've got all this wonderful foliage coming through at this time of year, and you're looking at me.
There we are. Look at that blast of colour.
Yeah, do you know what it is?
No.
No, okay, it's a cotinus probably Conjugiria, smoke bush. Beautiful, beautiful autumn colour. The cordyline growing up there as well.
It's actually a really nice variety of colour. So it dies off from the bottom of the branches up to the very tips, and the tips are still
Sort of iridescent, see-through. Look at that. It's like a stained glass. It's just
actually just turn it up, put it up to the sky there, Ollie. Just going to sort of see. Oh, it's gonna. They can just. Yeah, there you go. But yeah, you get. It looks like a bit of stained glass, natural stained glass, doesn't it? Yeah.
So here there's sort of two very different, not necessarily climates, but soil conditions in this area, because the water flows downhill, obviously, and on this side it gets slightly more sun than on this side, and so on this side you've got the more sort of sun and dry loving plants, and on this side you've got the more sort of South American forest plants growing, although it's all a bit in the sense of this garden, it's sort of mashed together, isn't it? There's a wonderful mixing of plants through each other. Look at the papery bark on that birch. It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Is that a Himalayan birch rather than?
I wouldn't know, mate, I'm afraid.
We do have a little copse of the Himalayan birch just up at the White Stag Meadow. This looks a bit more coppery, doesn't it? Do you think?
Again, you look a little closer at it. It's just lovely thing.
Yeah, beautiful. Lovely sound as well. Beautiful sound, yeah. All the senses today, guys. I think that's probably something that's really worked. Oh, my camera's doing a bit of a funny thing.
Having a wobbly.
It is. Hold on. Turn on. Yep. There we go. Yeah. So yeah, the senses. I mean, this is one of. Like I probably yab about this a fair amount. Is like it's not just about the sight, guys. Like listen, touch, feel. And of course the smells here in the gardens themselves.
Yeah. Although you'd say he's right. He's absolutely right. It's not just about the sight, but one of the things that I've tried to get in the habit of is we all tend to. You either look at the ground in front of you or just what's coming on ahead. Look what's going on up above you. Get that sense of scale. Feel yourself into an area, a space, be it a garden or a city or a church or wherever you are. You look all around. Don't just look at what's right in front of you. We all go through life like we're driving a car, looking at what the hazard that's coming at us from ahead. Where it's taking a bit of time and slowing down. Yeah,
and it gets called mindfulness nowadays for the fashionable thing. But do you know what?
Buzzword on it, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been around for a long time, guys. Just take that time to just sort of smell the proverbial roses.
There's something creaking away up there.
Yeah, I can see there's a little hung limb up there. Thankfully, it's not over any of our main pathways, which is why it's still there, basically.
All main plants.
Main plants, yep.
Yep.
Funny enough, actually, that's a good point, because we have a couple of trees we have our eyes on at the moment, which isn't necessarily from a tree safety management for people's access. It's actually about the potential of what they might do if they land on what's below them from the collections side of things. So it's one of the things that we do consider when we're doing all of our sort of woodland tree management, and certainly in the gardens for you guys, you've got to sort of think about that layering.
What it's going to come down on, right? Yeah. Just walking through Memorial, this is an Embothrium coccinea, which was one of Lady Edith's favourite plants. One of the ones that was brought back again by William Lobb, the guy who was the man who made common the Oricaria auricana, the monkey puzzle tree. This time of year, not looking like much, but it is a member of the Proteaceae family, and it has these bright orange flowers on it that they kind of curl back in on themselves. It's a gorgeous plant. It sort of runs and spreads as well. It's a wonderful specimen.
Becky says it was only partially acceptable AMSR on the bark there. I don't have an ASMR microphone, unfortunately, otherwise I'd get some of those sounds going on. Yeah, shall we give a little bit of that, Becky? Go on.
Let me just destroying
you either love or hate that sound. It's like eating noises.
Who loves the sound of eating?
So some people do. Some people really hate it. I'm not a fan of lip smacking noises myself.
Gustatory noises.
So well, we've just dropped through that glade. Kind of into, well, the edge of the Lilly Wood itself, yeah. Again, absolutely stonking specimen trees through here as well, and these redwoods are absolutely brilliant, of course, but we've also got some other really nice...
It begins to get a little bit more horticultural at this point. Like, historically, this was an area of woodland, which when some trees came down, Lady Edith planted it up. She saw an opportunity to plant into it, and then it got a bit too horticultural, and we're sort of bringing it back from that point, these sort of island beds that were dropped in. But standing here, it's this perfect kind of glade view through veteran trees, sort of statement pine trees. There's the magnolias growing up there. You've got the mahonia flowering away on the edge of the shamrock garden here with the topiary that at some point in the near future Stu will get around to cutting, so we will have it cut before the end of this year, which is great news. There was a risk that we weren't going to get the chance to do that. But yeah, it begins to get a bit more, horticulture, aesthetic is sort of how I would feel. Not that, native woodland isn't aesthetic, but I don't want to...
No, I don't. There's a common misconception that I hate gardens. It's not true. I think it's like everything. Everything has its place. I do love a good quality woodland, and there's not very much natural woodland left anymore. So anything that even remotely looks like it is kind of quite nice in my eyes. And even here, like say through the Lilly Wood itself, we've got some cyclamen species. Is this?
It's a sort of cyclamen. I don't know what sort of cyclamen. I'd like to call it heterofolium, but I don't think it is. But just look at that again. That kind of iridescent purple as you swing it around. Gorgeous plants. But so this area here, we talk about the water running down. This is where it runs into. The mower got stuck in this little patch here recently, but look how quickly the grass is coming back on it. But the water sluices down into here. So see creeping buttercup, which is a prime indicator species of wet and waterlogged ground. The primulas are doing really well. This type Primula pulverentula, and a pulverent is a sort of powderiness on the...
There's one flowering away actually still. The seasons have been a bit messed up.
Oh yeah, there is in there. Yeah, good shout. Yeah, Hedychium growing through here as well, and then of course you've got the gunner and the rheums that grow up on that corner. Down into the bamboo. This is the bamboo tunnel. I was talking to Lady Rose recently. She said she remembers it when she was young. It was sort of they called it their house, their bamboo house, whereas now it's sort of like a bamboo multi-complex. It's just gradually spread and got bigger and bigger and wider and wider.
I'll tell you what, so if we loop round this side, go past the Northern root plate and we'll come up through, because it'd be interesting to see, because I haven't actually been down since we did the clearance of that tree, and that Northern fir landed right slap bang in the middle of the complex.
It's beginning to poke its head back up. The new shoots of the bamboo is coming through. Tough as blazes though, isn't it? It's basically bulletproof.
I keep saying that we've got... There's quite a few sort of various bamboos that are escaping in certain places of the upper garden, especially around the wall garden area. I keep saying I must get in contact with Belfast Zoo and see if their red pandas want it.
Well, if they want that sass, they're welcome to it. But these are clump-forming bamboos. If you're ever going to plant a bamboo anywhere, make sure it's a clump former rather than a runner. It's the running bamboos that cause the problem, and they spread everywhere. And that sass up at the top of the garden is a real indicator of that. It's awful thing, horrible thing. But these are clumping bamboos, and if we go into it, you'll see that. You can see here they all sort of come up from the main boost of it. But yeah,
here's what's left. That sat back nicely, and you can obviously see the rise of it, and the scar just at the backside where it folded up on itself is full of water, because that's basically what the water level is like at the moment. It's a very wet area down here. We are arguably at sea level, near enough, by about 1.5 metre, I think it is roughly.
Look at the size of those tree ferns. Aren't they stunning? The Dixonias, just massive fronds on them. That is an absolute champion.
Well, go stand down by it, because again the camera.
Into the mud, Toby.
Yeah, the camera doesn't do scale justice. But I remember when I went to New Zealand, the South Island in 2010. Obviously these just grow like there's no tomorrow through the woodlands. That's their native environment, but they are absolutely cracking seeing them growing up. In excess of, they grow about 20-25 metres in the... They're huge, yeah.
Yeah, we've got a massive one down the end there, which is... It's not in the best of conditions. It's maybe gone on a bit too long, but we'll keep it for absolutely... It's like the birch tree. We'll keep it for absolutely as long as possible. Some of the oldest specimens of Dixonia in particular in the British Isles come from the trunks of them were used as ballast on the old trading ships, because they provide a bit of weight, but they're also full of air. And then when they got to the other side and they were ready to stock up again, they chuck all the trunks overboard. And every now and then one of them would land next to a little freshwater stream coming down the beach, and it would begin to shoot through. And that's how you end up with these massive specimens, which there's no chance they would have grown here from spore or from seed. But that's where the oldest ones come from.
Just looking at this cherry here, actually, it's got one of the. Possibly one of the, it's certainly cankerform and possibly one of the phytophoras on it. See those bleeding cankers around it. Interesting. Otherwise, seems okay.
Well, in this garden, do they?
They're fine in the. I think again it's a damp thing. We've got a lot of wild cherry, as in like the true bird cherry, up through some of the other woodlands, and they're going mad. But yeah, certainly some of the other ones just don't seem to make it quite so well down here.
That's right.
You can really see that sort of bleeding cankers and the weep coming down the tree there. Yeah. So, sorry, I got one little question here. Greta was asking, are the gardens going to be illuminated for Christmas? Now, we've never actually done an illuminated Christmas gardens, and the answer is no, unfortunately. All events at the moment are off. We just don't have the capacity after everything that's happened this year to be able to do any of these things, and of course we probably wouldn't be allowed to either.
Well, yeah, and I never want to say never, but it's not my intention to light them up too drastically. We will at some point in the near future be closing off parts of the lawns in the formal gardens, and you're about to walk through a puddle there, yeah, because they're just so wet, and the damage that is being caused inadvertently, of course, but is being caused by the mass footfall going across them. So we'll give them a break through the wet season and see what we have on the other side of it.
Yeah, it's worth it. Again, even under our current sort of limited capacity with the amount of visitors that we can have in, it's still over capacity for the time of year relative to the infrastructure that's in place, which is really, it's really interesting. You see that so much in the unpaved and the hard-cored areas, and so we walk this fine line on the trails as well around the wider domain of like how far we can go down that route of a hard surface before it starts taking away from the feel of the place.
To be, yeah, these sort of moss-covered rides, and I'm always one for a gentle informal path rather than a bit of hard standing, but some places you got to do what's got to be done, haven't you?
Let's take a stroll on through. You can lead the way, Ollie. It's this is, we're literally, it's absolutely sopping here. You can see how high the water table is, but this is exactly walking the line where the Nordman fir came down, so it's kind of opened up a clearing. You can see what's left of the other tunnels, but yeah, look at all that fresh growth Ollie's just picked out there. So
what's that, a couple of months? A bit more?
When was it? Was it June or July? I don't know. So I know we had that weird summer storm, and it was a lot of rain in the middle of summer. Yeah.
So this one here, this clump here, I took a notion and took a chainsaw to it because it had all been a bit damaged, and it was more bother than it was worth, basically trying to get a chainsaw through the reediness of it. But so you see how quickly it's popped back up again. You look at this dense mass. We'll go on this side. That there is not personally something that I find particularly aesthetically beautiful to look at, but then you get this freshness and a little bit of airiness going through it, and you sort of see through it, and it has a much more open feel to it.
It's nice to have the mix here now, actually, because as fun as it was being this sort of little maze, and you can sort of see, get an idea of some of the sections and the little mazes through them. Having a little bit of light in here, and I've just walked straight into out. There we go. It's quite hard to smack my head off it. You can see how dark it is, and you know what? Okay, it's a bit of a fun, but having a bit of that fresh growth, yeah, definitely, I agree, Ollie.
It's like replenishing the shelter boats. Just sometimes you knock it down and let it come back up again, give it a bit of a new lease of life.
Cool. So we're sort of getting to the rough end of it, and here's something that I always like if we're talking coppery colours.
Oh, Luma apiculata, isn't it? Yeah, one of my favourite trees are the Lumas. Seed themselves furiously. You can see the black, they're purple berries if you get close enough to them coming on. They seed themselves like moss on the ground. These are all self-seeded Luma plants, and yeah, they're a member of the myrtle family, so same as eucalyptus, and they have that kind of peeling bark aspect. And they're always cold to the touch. They're cold?
Yeah, I remember hearing something about that.
It's one of my favourite facts. I've probably told you it before.
We definitely should have bought that thermometer.
Yeah, we have to put it into the middle of it. We've got some sort of wildlife. Well, there they go.
Look at the blackbirds having a bit of a...
Yeah, they're always cool to the touch, like cooler than the surrounding atmosphere, which it raises, I think, like some quite interesting questions about regulation of internal temperatures or methods of registering the external temperature, which isn't something we necessarily think that a tree can do. And there's very little information about it online, helpfully.
There's the berries are quite chunky, old, really shiny as well in that light there. Look at that.
Gorgeous trees.
There's a really nice sort of smaller, but it's like a half standard form of this myrtle at one of the holiday cottages on the north coast at Port Braddon. There's an NT holiday cottage. They've got a beautiful one in the back garden there, and again it just lights up at this time of year. I remember when I used to work there.
Luma, because they just irradiate light, that low sunlight when it bounces off it. Yeah, they glow. They are luminous. They're gorgeous trees and tough as well. If you can get them through their first sort of 5 or 6 years, they'll take snow no problem whatsoever. They grow slowly and they grow beautifully.
They've got quite a dense wood too. So I remember there's a few. One came down a little while ago, and sort of the stems, and they have a very nice audible tone to them when you hit them.
Oh yeah.
You know, if you could make like a wood, woodland xylophone out of them.
Oh, okay.
Talking about collared earth stars, and look what is right at our feet here, which is brilliant. I didn't think we'd see any, but we've got a really nice cluster of them here. So this is one of the fungi I was just talking about earlier on. So these are well over now, so they've finished the openness, and if anyone's familiar with puffballs, same scenario, they spread their pores. There we go. That's a really ripe one, that. Look at that. Brilliant. Beautiful little cluster of them here, actually. Yeah. All sort of different sizes, and there's a tiny one there. Oh, nice to see it. Let's sort of see them, yeah. So where to next, Oli? Just to sort of start into wine. I'll pick out a few questions while you're chatting. Oli in his natural habitat amongst the ferns, says Nez.
Yeah. Blechnum chilense or capense, I'm not sure which one it is, that one, but it's a beautiful coarse fern. In fact, talking of noises that things make, you run your hand over it.
It's like a raspy, crisp sound.
Beautiful, but it's one of those things. It's coarse not just to the feel; it's also coarse to the eye. And if you look along here to where these astellias are growing, the Astelia chathamica, they're shiny, they're glossy to the eye, and so you've got this beautiful contrast, and then that kind of glossiness of the bamboo coming up through it as well. Yeah, Blechnum, the Blechnacea are a wonderful family of ferns.
It's something that having the this directional mic on just to stop the wind really takes away from being able to hear some of the sounds that are around us, actually, compared to just having the normal phone microphone. So whenever we do have those still days in future live streams and videos, I'll definitely be whipping off the wind mic, so you can really sort of get that sound. Whipping off the wind mic. It's brilliant. Actually, I was just chatting to Lady Rose earlier on today, and she was commenting on, obviously, the kiwi.
Yeah, which is looking magnificent. It's growing around an old totem of a dead conifer in there. It's not just self-sustaining in that form, but yeah, it grows outside, so it gives you an idea of the sheltered conditions down here and the evening out, particularly of temperature flux that the loch provides. A frost down here is rare. It's not unheard of, but it is rare, and we will get fruits off that kiwi, but they never get time to ripen. They're like little musket balls. There's like a marble coming down off it.
She said, I think it was her mother once made a jam out of them, and the response was bleh.
Yeah, not high. yeah, it wasn't gratefully received. There's a cardiacrinum popping its head up in there, one of the giant Himalayan lilies just behind the catalpa. You see the seed pods.
The seed pods on that are beautiful, actually.
Well, I'm not going to be tall enough to get one of them down, but if we could open one.
Oh, there's a little gold crest. Sorry, gold crest, just there. That's our smallest bird species. They're about half the size of a wren. They're really small, but not much bigger than your thumb, really.
It's not huge, though, is it?
Yeah, beautiful. We have a very good population of gold crests here. Beautiful little birds. Look to the skies and hear that little sort of prattling and tweeting. Yeah, you won't get it without snapping, but there you go. There you go.
And so it obviously hasn't ripened enough, this one, but each one of these Look at those seeds. Look how many of them there are in there. That is just... take a fair while
it's
and
like
a fair...
like a coin store.
Yeah, and so each one of these carpels, which is the segment of the mature ovum, will contain that many of them, and they can take up to 8 years to get to the point where they flower, and we are trying to grow more and more of these because they'd be great, especially out and around the lake and that sort of area. But so we found the bed that we walked past earlier with the bamboo tunnel in it, that is sort of known as the cardiocrinum bed, but because it's so wet, they're not growing in there. Now these things grow in the Himalaya, where water rushes past them, but we've actually found the best one that we have in the garden is in the Italian garden, where it gets full sun, and it's in the beating. Obviously there's some rain and there's some water that we put down in it, but nothing like down here, and that's the best specimen. Just experimentation is always key to gardening.
What's the just trying to work out what the golden
That's
sort
a
of
ginkgo.
It is. That's what I thought it was.
Ginkgo.
I thought.
Let's go and have a
Yeah, let's
chat
have a look at the
ginkgo.
ginkgo. We like the ginkgos, which will quite often just stay almost like in a growth status for periods of time, and then suddenly put a bit of a growth spurt on sometimes.
They're mad and interesting if you're into this sort of thing. Trees, because they're technically a conifer, or what we would think of as being evergreen trees, despite the fact that they drop their leaves. And the reason for that is that conifers are gymnosperms, and gymnosperm means that it has a naked seed. So the ginkgo is exactly that. It doesn't have a fruit around the seed, or it doesn't have something that is actually botanically defined as a fruit around the seed. The female trees, the fleshy pulp, when it drops, it smells like sick. It smells like vomit. It's awful. So you tend to only find male trees planted, but these are like living fossils, relics. They are the only thing in their family, and a lot of these trees, especially if you see them in city centres, so ginkgos were one of the plants that survived a direct hit from the nuclear bombs in Nagasaki, and after a couple of years, despite the trunk being so scorched off by the blast, they started pushing out new fresh shoots. And of course the Japanese are incredible horticulturalists. They took cuttings of these things, and once they'd grown up, they sent them around the world as sort of a commemoration, and let's never do that again kind of thing. So yeah, they're gorgeous trees with a great history to them, and that pollution, which is essentially what the nuclear fallout is, didn't affect the tree because it is such a rudimentary form of life that it doesn't actually have the means of passing the poison into its internal system. It only ever pushes outwards. But gorgeous colour on it, isn't it? Lovely colour.
So just for reference, that's kind of basically up there with ferns. The Wollemi pine, of course, which was rediscovered in 97 in a gorge. 94, is it? Yeah, okay. That was in a gorge or canyon sort of about 40 miles west of Sydney, and it had been thought as extinct until that point.
Well, so they didn't even know it existed, did they? We haven't got time to go and have a look at it, have we? It's on the other side of the garden. But yeah, so they didn't know that the Wollemi pine existed until David Noble found one in a sandstone canyon, which is still, the location of it is kept secret. But he was kind of, he was a gardener, but it wasn't anything special, so he sent it off to one of his mates who was a bit of a more professional gardener, and he had a look at this thing and sort of said, oh, I've got no idea what that is. He sent it off to Sydney Botanics, and they had no idea what it is, but they couldn't say that. They're Sydney Botanics, and eventually they found a fossil record of it in a stone. So during the droughts and the wildfires that have been happening in Australia this year, they watered that canyon so that the Wollemi pines that were growing there didn't die out. And it's one of those things, we've done such vast amounts of damage to our climate and to plant and animal life, but that's one of the sort of heartening things that came out of quite a dark and awful time for Australia.
Definitely, and of course, because that's the only known natural occurrence of it, they've been propagated and sort of spread around the world as a botanical collection.
Yeah, so in #97, that was when they first started being auctioned off, and those things would sell for anything between like £2,000 and £11,000, and now you can just buy them in petrol stations. They're common as much. The only thing remarkable about them now is the story. They're not even that impressive to look at. They're kind of ugly looking things. Now they're not even rare either. But
well, that's it. Nobody obviously sees them in their mature form at the moment, mainly because, of course, pretty much all of them are only about 10 or 20 years old that have been planted.
Yeah,
so
the oldest one is at Sydney Botanics, and it's only about 20 foot or so, and we're still learning about them. They're still writing about them. Most of them seem to be single stem, some of them seem to be multi-stem. It's a plant, isn't it? There's no real rhyme or reason to it. You just sort of guess and categorise as you can. Do you reckon we'd be able to just poke our head through the gate just to see?
I'm sure we can. Yeah. So yeah, guys, we're sort of just winding up to the end. haven't had very many questions in from people this year. Everyone's just enjoying listening to you ramble on, which is great. If you're willing to listen, yes. Say that again.
Soporific tones.
There you go. There's another word to look up. So yeah. If you've got any final questions, get them in now. It'll be another month before our next live stream, which is on the 15th of December. Haven't got an idea what I'm going to do for that one yet, so it may just be a nice Christmas stroll.
Yeah, we'll have another little chat, shall we?
Yeah, who knows. Well, I mean, you can always let us know where you'd like me to go for the next live stream and take a closer look. It would be quite nice to sort of hear from you, and you guys steer where we want to go. But so just to close up here, and if any other questions come in while you're chatting, I'll just keep an eye on them, Ollie. Obviously here on the formal lawns, and
so Lisa has been working away clearing these beds out, getting our more tender specimens up to the glass houses, which I hope you saw on the Facebook video last week. Tim showing you around some of that new space we've got, which is great, incredibly generous. But things we are also trying to leave more things in the ground. We're taking our chances on a few things. The things that sort of at the edge of our capabilities, covering them up, putting straw over them if they're a ground laying thing, and just it saves us time, and it will also allow the plant to grow better as well without ripping it up and not destroying but damaging its roots every year when it comes out of the ground. And it just, we hope that it will allow the plants to sort of fill themselves out a little bit more. Although, at this time of year, that's a tree dahlia that's flowering there from Mexico. That's Dahlia.
Take a closer look.
Excelsa. I think I love dahlias, and I particularly love tree dahlias. And usually, well, not usually, but what can happen is if you have a really strong wind come through, it will just decimate the flowers. Sorry, I'll get one off. Oh, he's in the bed as well.
I'm stepping where the plant was removed.
Yeah, look at how gorgeous that is. The beautiful openness and that kind of ultraviolet colour with the yellow golden pollen in it. They're gorgeous things. And so what?
Even the unopened flowers, and then obviously the spent flowers, they look really great as well.
So the way to tell the difference between seed heads and buds is the buds will always be conical, whereas the seed heads will be going flat at the bottom of them. Or the other way around. It's the other way around, isn't it? Yeah, seed heads are flat.
Because the seed head
But yeah, so what we'll do with this is cut it down to the ground, cover it with straw, put a fleece over it, and leave it in until next year.
Yeah. So yeah, like Ollie was saying, you can see some of the root holes from some of the more tender stuff that has gone back up to the glass houses. So that's yeah, there you go. So and you were saying I've got some poles for you because you need to replace a few of these this winter.
Yeah, so this is one of the new ones here. These are the larch poles that we grow the roses up. The rose on this side is Rosy Rambler. On the other side it's Ard's Rover, which is one of the Dixon nursery roses. Dixon's are from just on the edge of the peninsula over there. Sorry, not the peninsula, just outside Newton Ard's over there. But yeah, Toby has been cutting down trees and leaving them under cover for a really long time because they started snapping at the base. And so this
is actually an ash pole, which it's had 3 years curing, so it's going to be really nice and solid.
It's probably got about my height going into the ground there as well. I really dug that one in. I mean, you can hear Stewart cutting the bay hedges up there as well. It's great walking around the garden now that everyone's back and there's just all of this work going on around, and I can indulge myself by doing this sort of thing and walking around just talking plants. Do we have any time?
Well, we've still got plenty of people watching. We're 20 minutes over our normal time, but if people are still watching, we'll carry on.
We've got this is a type of Buddleia. This is Buddleia Salvia flora, I think it is. And it's, again, you look a little closer, you've got the white and then that sort of bronze coming through, a beautiful fluffiness to it. Yeah, wonderful foliage plant. Look at the new growth coming, the juvenile leaves coming out of that.
If I can hold that still a minute, just to get that to focus. It's kind of scaly. Well, I don't know, scaly is not the right word, but like sages.
Yes.
But it's even softer and thinner. Really quite delicate leaves.
You look, and then, so you look at the fur that's coming on that stem there.
Just get that to focus there. There we go. Lovely.
Marvellous, isn't it?
And this is mostly a low-forming form of Buddleia then?
Nope. No, it will get big.
Yeah,
there's one growing. There's one growing up here in Oak, which is just filling it out. But Tim's been taking cuttings of these, so we've got a few more of them coming on, and they give that lovely silvery contrast colour on both sides of the parterres, and they just fill in nice gaps and get a bit big and boisterous. The thing about our parterres, we don't fill them with bedding, we fill them with plants, woody, exotic specimens, dandelion trees. Yeah, beautiful.
So guys, I think we are going to have to. That's been an hour 20 already, and I know both of us would quite happily ramble on endlessly about our jobs and what we do because we love it. And seeing the comments that comment there, obviously the enthusiasm is infectious. It's one of the comments. So yeah, and I agree.
Hopefully it's just the enthusiasm.
Yes, oh, it's a very hot topic. Yeah. So guys, thank you so much for watching as always, guys, and I really hope that these are being useful for you guys, and we're going to continue them as always monthly for the live streams themselves. So yeah, do let me know where you want to go for December the 15th, Tuesday 11 is the next one. I haven't got anything planned, so yeah, let us know where you're thinking. I'll probably ask again in say the Tuesday Mount Stewart moment I have the week before, just to see where you want to go. And I have got that Pine Martin footage that I promised you all. I've got all the raw footage now. I just need to get a chance just to sort of whip it together into a little edit. So yeah, I'm really pleased to see the Pine Martins kind of showing up on camera, which has been really nice to see. So as always, guys, thank you so much, and I think we'll finish there. And I'll say cheers, Ollie.
Oh yeah, no, thank you, mate. Thanks for getting me out of work.
I'll say I've been told that we can't do it on, if anybody's coming out of the PLT meetings, then it has to change the date now. So.
Oh, okay.
So it's all good, but we'll make sure that we always try and have guests where possible. So guys, thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you at the next Tuesday or the next live stream. Bye bye.